Good evening. We are learning Parshat Kitisa. We're familiar with Parshat Kitisa from Parshat Shkalim already. We learned about Jewish people donating half a shekel, machatzit shekel. And in Parshat Kitisa, we learned that really this half a shekel was used as a way of counting the Jewish people. Hashem said to Moshe on page 485 of Ar Sechor Chumash, when you take a census of the children of Israel, you have to ask them to give you half a shekel each. Verse 13 says, this shall they give, everyone who passes through the census, a half a shekel of the sacred shekel. Shekel is 20 gerah. Gerah is a smaller coin. As a portion to Hashem. From 20 years of age and up shall they give the portion of Hashem. The wealthy cannot give more, and the poor cannot give less. To give the portion of Hashem to atone for your souls. So we just read that the word teruma in English translated as portion or donation is repeated 3 times. And that is to say that the Jewish people donated half a shekel coin 3 times. Once for the construction of Mishkan, and that was used as the foundation for the pillars. The pillars were made of wood, covered with gold, and they were inserted into the foundation of silver. So the 600,000 Jewish people that donated half a shekel altogether was enough silver to create bases, sockets for all the beams of the Mishkan. This was the first one-time donation of half a shekel. And then in all future years, the Jewish people donated one more half a shekel. And that was used throughout the coming year for all the public offerings. This way, every Jew participated in every offering that was brought for the Jewish nation. That means every day, one lamb in the morning, one lamb in the afternoon. And on Shabbat, in addition to regular 2 animals, 2 more animals were brought. On Rosh Chodesh, there was a special offering in addition to daily offering, and on every holiday. So the half a shekel of silver that every Jew gave was enough to supply offerings for the entire year. And the third time that the Jewish people gave half shekel was also a yearly voluntary donation for the maintenance of the Mishkan and later Beit HaMikdash. And that is why we give half a shekel coin before Purim, because the Jewish people used to give the donation of half a shekel specifically in the month of Adar. And in fact, it was announced that people should bring donations on Rosh Chodesh Adar, and the people had the whole month to bring donations. And from the first of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the new donations were used. The old, whatever was left from the old donations, was set aside and was used for additional offerings in case the altar, the Mizbeach, was empty. The Mizbeach was used for public offerings and private offerings. But if all the public offerings were finished and private offerings were finished, and there's still time in the day, so they would use the money from whatever was left over from last year. So again, there were 3 donations, half a shekel each. One, to count the Jewish people for the census, and after that they were used for the sockets, for the foundations of the beams of the Mishkan. 2, a yearly donation for all the offerings in the coming year. And 3, a yearly donation for the maintenance of the Mishkan and Beit HaMikdash. Now, the question that is asked, why don't you just count the Jewish people? Why do you have to have them give you an object, an item, and you count the items and then you get the total number? And the answer is because we have a rule. Blessing can only be found in things that are hidden from the eye, for 2 reasons. Number one, because the eye might be an evil eye, someone might be jealous, surprised, overwhelmed by such a large number of the Jewish people, like we see Pharaoh Paro in Egypt said, "Whoa, look, there are more Jewish people than Egyptians. That's not good. Let's enslave them." And the same thing happens again and again. Whenever someone sees that someone else has more, they get jealous. And so, therefore, we try to hide what we have. We try to be modest and not show off, not only in our possessions, but even in our numbers, our family. So, we don't boast and brag how many children, how many grandchildren we have, and we don't boast how many citizens we have. And if we count for our internal needs, we count using objects. That's one reason that we don't count people, in order that no ayin hara should be put on them. The second reason why we don't count people is because of this concept that we mentioned. The blessing is not found except in something that's hidden from the eye, and that is because Hashem does not perform open miracles anymore. And in general, Hashem never liked to perform open miracles because that takes away freedom of choice. And Hashem wants people to be free thinking, without any pressure, without any force. If Hashem shows miracles, people will be so impressed that they might do the right thing only because they're scared of God, because they see Him clearly. But everything being equal, if they would just be aware of the physical world and not be aware of God, and they would actually be thinking for themselves without fearing, they might not do the good. So Hashem really wants to test us, and therefore He says, I'm going to hide myself. As if a boss wants to see how his employees act, so he puts a camera and he sits in his office and he's watching the camera. And if the camera is obvious, then the employees are going to be careful. But if the boss puts a hidden camera, then he will really see what they are up to. So Hashem also, He put hidden cameras all over, because without cameras He sees. But He hides Himself so that we should feel that no one is watching. And therefore, we will be free to do what we think is right. And we better think that the right thing is right. We hope. Now, so Hashem doesn't do open miracles. And therefore, if He wants to give us blessing, increase our numbers or our money, if we know exactly how many of us there are, and if we know exactly how much money we have, Hashem will not be able to increase it, because that would go against the rule that Hashem doesn't do open miracles. So if we want to help God to make a miracle for us, we have to arrange things in such a way that the miracle will not be open. And therefore, if I don't know how many people are in the Jewish nation, one day I might wake up and it's going to be 15 million. A little later, I'll wake up and it's going to be 20 million. And a little later, 30 million. And I'm going to say, okay, fine, makes sense. With time, we increase. But in reality, it's a miracle that God is performing. But if I know exactly, we did a census, and I know exactly how many people there are, Hashem's hands are tied. I can't do an open miracle. Same thing, if I know exactly how much money is in my wallet, Hashem cannot put an extra $20 bill in there. Why? Because I'll say, where did this $20 come from? I didn't put it here. Someone put it here. Must be a miracle. And Hashem doesn't want to do a miracle. But if I don't know how much money is in my pocket, every time I need money, I just reach into my pocket and I take out the money. This is similar to the stories about Baba Saleh, that he used to have a bottle of arak, and he would wrap a towel around it, and he would go around and serve his guests. Why? Because if you observe the bottle through the clear glass, and you see that as he's pouring, the arak is supposed to diminish, and it's not diminishing, you'll say it's an open miracle. He already poured 10 cups, and the bottle is still full. It's an open miracle. But if he keeps it wrapped, he pours 10 cups, you don't know. You assume the bottle is already half empty. He pours another 10 cups, you think, okay, it's quarter empty. He pours another 10 cups, you say, okay, I don't know when it's going to finish. And he pours another 10 cups, and it never finishes. But at least it doesn't look like an open miracle. So we have to pay attention to that and not count our money unless we want to separate maaser, and not count our, as they say, don't count your chickens until it's time to sell them. So basically, the Jewish people are very careful not to count people by heads, but rather by objects. Okay, now we turn to page 487. And here we have the mitzvah to construct another utensil in the Beit HaMikdash. Now somebody is asking, are we allowed to count monthly salary? Of course, in order to separate maaser. If you have a business and you need to balance your income and expenses, that is also important, because you need to be able to stay afloat and you need to be able to pay your workers. But your intent should not be, I want to count how much I earned so that I know how much I have, because this way you're putting a limit on your earnings. But you say, I want to know how much maaser I want to give, how much I have to pay to workers, and whatever is left, I'm gonna keep, but I'm not memorizing the number. I'm not writing it down. This way, my money can increase. Okay, so on page 487, Hashem says to Moshe, make a copper laver. Laver means a wash basin, just like the word lavatory means a wash room for washing. And Aharon and his sons shall wash their hands and together with their feet whenever they come to the tent of meeting to serve God. Before Kohanim serve in Beit HaMikdash, they must go to the wash basin and put their hands and feet together and wash them. This is after they went to the mikveh and after they got dressed. Now they have to wash their hands and feet. Now, verse 22, anointment oil. Hashem said to Moshe, take choice spices, and it lists 5 spices and the exact amount of each spice, and put them in, mix it together with oil. Oil is the fifth ingredient, and this oil should be used for anointment of the tent of meeting, the Mishkan, and utensils, as well as the altars and the table and the wash basin. So Moshe made anointment oil, and this oil was used in the Mishkan and in the first Beit HaMikdash. The Torah says that you're not allowed to make a copy of that oil. Moshe was the only one who made it, and since then we used his oil. Once in history it was made, and then towards the end of the first Beit HaMikdash, this anointment oil, Shemen HaMishcha, was hidden, and in times of Mashiach it will be brought out again, and we will anoint the third Beit HaMikdash, Bezat Hashem. And this oil was also used to anoint Kohanim, especially the Kohen Gadol, and kings. Every Jewish king that rose to power was anointed with this oil. That is why a Jewish king is called Mashiach, the anointed one. David HaMelech is called Mashiach, Mashiach Hashem, the anointed one of Hashem. And therefore, in the future, when Mashiach is going to come, we call him Mashiach. Why? Because he will be anointed as the king. Mashiach from the tribe of Yehuda, descendant of King David, will also be anointed with that same anointment oil that Moshe Rabbeinu made. In verse 34, we learn about ketoret, the incense. It was made of 11 spices, and some of them are listed in verse 34. And they would mix it together, grind it into powder, fine powder, and they would burn it every morning and every afternoon. And there was a special ketoret service on Yom Kippur. Ketoret was burned on the golden inner altar, and on Yom Kippur it was also burned inside the Kodesh HaKodashim, at the bottom of the altar, of the ark, the holy ark, right in front of the ark, on top of the Even HaShitiyah, the foundation stone. And the ketoret was also not allowed to be made for personal use, but a Jew is allowed to make ketoret in its original recipe if he's planning to donate it to Beit HaMikdash. Now, we continue chapter 31. Hashem appoints Betzalel, son of Uri, from the tribe of Yehuda, to be the supervisor, the main artisan, and the architect of the Mishkan. And now we're on page 491. In verse 6, Hashem says, I have assigned to help Betzalel Aholiav, son of Achisamach, from the tribe of Dan. And here we see that Betzalel was from the highest, the first tribe, Yehuda, and Aholiav was from the lowest tribe, from Dan, to tell you that in front of God everyone is equal. If you want to serve God, you are on the same level with every Jew who comes to serve God as well. You can be from the tribe of Yehuda, you can be from the tribe of Dan, and we will honor you the same way. Now, in verse 12, after describing all the utensils and parts of the Mishkan that Bezalel and Aholiav made, Hashem says, however, you must observe my Shabbat. Even though I just spent 2.5 parshiyot speaking about the construction of Mishkan, and after this parsha, 2 more parshiyot will be spent speaking about Mishkan. Mishkan is so important, the house of God. However, Shabbat is more important. Don't forget about Shabbat while you're building the Mishkan. And this is, by the way, one of the sources, and there are a couple more, where right after the commandment to construct the Mishkan, the Torah tells us, but keep Shabbat. And from here we learn that whatever was used for construction of the Mishkan cannot be done on Shabbat. The 39 forbidden labors, melachot, that we cannot do on Shabbat are derived from what did they do to construct the Mishkan. And it in verse 14 mentions that those that desecrate Shabbat shall be put to death. And that is if there are witnesses with a warning. But if there are no witnesses, then it says, whoever does work on Shabbat, his soul shall be cut off from among his people. So without witnesses and warning, person who desecrated Shabbat on purpose has spiritual excision. Now we turn to page 493, and here we have the famous paragraph that we say every Friday night in prayer and every Shabbat day in Kiddush. The children of Israel shall observe Shabbat, to make Shabbat an eternal covenant for their generations. Between me, God, and the children of Israel, it is a sign forever that in a 6-day period Hashem made heaven and earth, and on a 7th day he rested and was refreshed. Uvayom HaShevi Shavat Ve'inafash. And verse 18 speaks about Moshe receiving the 10 commandments. When Hashem finished speaking with Moshe on Har Sinai, he gave Moshe the 2 tablets of testimony, stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God. And now, in chapter 32, starts the sad story of the mistake that the Jewish people made. The mistake of the golden calf. The people saw that Moshe had delayed in descending the mountain. 40 days passed and Moshe still didn't come. And the people gathered around Aharon and said to him, make for us gods, with a lowercase g, that will go before us. For this man Moshe, who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what became of him. So this is surprising. Why are Jewish people making an idol? And the answer is they're not making an idol. What the Jewish people are making, and they're saying this clearly, the Jewish people are asking Moshe, Aharon, we don't know what happened to Moshe. Moshe, our leader, disappeared. We need someone to lead us. Moshe took us out from Egypt and now he left us alone. What's going to be with us? We need someone to guide us. Why don't they go to Hashem? Why don't they ask Hashem for guidance? And the answer is because 40 days earlier, during the revelation, during the giving of the Torah, Hashem appeared to the Jewish people and spoke to them. He said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Shorotziticha Meretz Mitzrayim. I am Hashem, your God. And when the Jewish people heard that, their soul departed, because the soul felt the connection to Hashem, and like a magnet attracted the iron, their soul was attracted to Hashem. They died. And Hashem revived them, and He put the soul back into their body. And then Hashem said again, Lo yelecha Elohim achirim al panai. You may not have any other gods before me. You may not serve idols. And again, when they heard Hashem, their soul attached to Hashem, and they died again. And when Hashem revived them again, they said, please, no more. Moshe, that's it. We cannot handle Hashem speaking to us anymore. You speak on behalf of Hashem to us. Moshe said, let me ask Hashem. Moshe asked Hashem, the Jewish people are saying that they don't want to die again from you speaking to them. They want me to be the middleman. Hashem said, if that's what they want, I'll give it to them. People have free choice. If they don't want to hear me anymore, I'm not going to talk to them openly anymore. But it is sad. If only they would be brave enough to hear my voice again, I would give them strength, and they would be able to withstand me speaking to them. Just like you, Moshe, you hear me and and you are okay. So Hashem said, Moshe, tell them that I accepted their request. And Moshe said to the Jewish people, from now on, I will be the intermediary. I will be the middleman between you and God. And the last 8 commandments was spoken by God to Moshe, and Moshe announced them to the people. And people trusted Moshe because Hashem told them, Moshe, you will speak to the people on my behalf. So since God appointed Moshe in front of people, they trusted him. Now, when Moshe is not there, people are worried. Who will be the new intermediary? And they say, we don't want a human intermediary anymore. Because just like Moshe was with us and now he's gone, he disappeared, the next guy we elect might disappear as well. People are mortal. Let us choose something that doesn't die. Let us make a statue and put in power in it through the use of the names of Hashem. And this object will receive the message from Hashem and announce the message to us. We will be protected from death because we're not going to face God. As it says later in the Parsha, no human can see God and stay alive. This idol, this object is not a human, it's not going to die. It will receive the message and transmit it to us. And by the way, all future problems that came upon the Jewish people came from that one mistake that the Jewish people made on the day of the revelation, when they said, we don't want to listen to Hashem face to face anymore. It's too scary. Cannot handle it. Let there be an intermediary. And from that incident, a possibility arose of there being a false prophet. Moshe and Yoshua and other prophets and judges were all good, but because there is an intermediary, someone might come and misuse our trust for his own agenda. And that happened, unfortunately, many times within the Jewish people themselves. And we know that the 2 major religions started exactly because of that. A man got an idea in his mind, I'm a prophet. Even though the era of prophecy ended, he said, I'm the new prophet, listen to me. And the Jewish people had a challenge, and the Jewish people withstood the challenge. They said, "No, we don't trust you." And he started Christianity for the non-Jews, because the Jewish people were loyal to the tradition of Moshe. And then another crazy guy came and he started a new religion. He said, "I'm the new prophet." And the Jewish people said, "No, you're not." And he was forced to go to the non-Jews again, and he started a new religion, Islam. And the Jewish people suffered greatly from Christianity and Islam. Why did this happen? Because the Jews were too scared to listen to Hashem directly. And because of this, idol worship arose. Because of this, false religions. They say that there were and are 15,000 various religions in the world. Why? Because the Jewish people did not want to listen to Hashem anymore. It was too scary. And because now we have to trust a human being to be the intermediary, trickery, lies, and craziness happen. And that's what happened over here. The Jewish people said, we need an intermediary. Let's create a God with a lowercase g. And Aaron tried to stall for time, and he said, okay, let's announce that we're collecting money, gold and silver. As soon as people will hear that there's a fundraising event, maybe they'll run away. They're gonna change their mind. Oh, I don't need God. If it's costs money, I don't need God. But the Yetzer Hara inspired the people, and the verse 3 says, the entire people removed the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron immediately. And Aaron took the gold from them, put it in cloth, wrapped it up, and threw it in fire. And it was fashioned into a molten calf. Molten means the gold melted, and then a golden calf emerged. This is probably where they got the idea of exterminator, where he rises from molten metal. This is what happened with the golden calf. It arose, and the Erev Rav, there was among the Jewish people who were used to serving idols in Egypt, they saw a calf rising from fire. They said, wow, this is the God. Must be. This is the God that took us out from Egypt. We didn't see the real God, or rather, yeah, we saw him, but then he disappeared. Probably this is the new reincarnation of God in this world. And they confused the Jews. The Jewish people understood no physical object can be God. No human being can be God. God is beyond this world. But the Erev Rav, people who joined the Jews from other nations, they did not know so much about God. So they assumed that the golden calf is God. And they announced, tomorrow we will celebrate and bring offerings to this idol. Rather, Aaron was hoping for the best, and he said, tomorrow we will bring offerings to Hashem. He was hoping that Moshe will come soon and he will stop all this. However, verse 6 says, they arose early the next day and offered up elevation offerings and brought peace offerings. And they got up to celebrate. And many of them did the actual idol worship. Verse 7, Hashem spoke to Moshe, go, descend, because the people that you brought up from the land of Egypt has become corrupt. They strayed quickly from the path I commanded them. Verse page 497. They have made themselves a molten calf, and they prostrated themselves, they bowed down to it and sacrificed to it. And they even said, "This is your God, O Israel, which brought you up from the land of Egypt." Hashem said, "Leave me alone. Let my anger flare up against them, and I shall annihilate them. But don't worry, I will make you a great nation." Moshe prayed to Hashem. "Why, Hashem, should your anger flare up against your people, whom you have taken out of the land of Egypt with great power and strong hand?" And here he offers two reasons why Hashem should not destroy the Jews. Reason number one, verse 12. Why should Egypt say the following? "With evil intent did Hashem take them out to kill them in the mountains and to annihilate them from the face of the earth." So Hashem says, it will cause Chilul Hashem, desecration of your name, if the Jewish people are going to be killed. Because Egyptians are going to say, God, Hashem, was stronger than us, but he is not stronger than the God of the desert, or he's not stronger than the gods of the land of Canaan. He couldn't overpower them. So, not to be embarrassed, he had to slaughter his own people in the desert. Not to be embarrassed that he cannot conquer the kings of Canaan. So Moshe says to Hashem, "Hashem, you're stuck. You brought them out of Egypt, now you have to deliver. Otherwise, Egyptians will laugh and say, Hashem could not do it." And now he says a second reason why Hashem should not annihilate the Jews. In verse 13, "Remember, for the sake of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Israel, your servants, because you swore to them, I shall increase your offspring like the stars of heaven." If you kill the Jewish people, where's the promise that the Jews are going to be like the stars of heaven? And what, you're going to make me a great nation? They have to wait another few 100 years? Moshe said, if a chair that stands on 3 feet, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Jewish people have 3 forefathers, and they couldn't survive, who says that I, myself, the lone progenitor of the Jews, who said that I will be successful? Who says that the nation that will come from me will survive? No. Please don't annihilate the Jews. And verse 14 says, Hashem reconsidered regarding the evil that he declared he would do to his people. With Moshe's successful prayer, he averted the destruction. And now Moshe goes down the mountain. Moshe descended from the mountain with the 2 tablets of testimony in his hand. Now, page 499. Verse 19. It happened, as he drew near the camp, he saw the calf and the dancers, and Moshe's anger flared up. And he threw the tablets down from his hands and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. The sages say that he really didn't throw them down. All he did was just open his hands and they fell. Because Moshe knew that really he's not supporting the tablets. The tablets, the work of God, they're holy. The letters that are inscribed in them, the letters of the 10 Commandments, are holy. They support the heavy stone tablets. And Moshe said, if the Jewish people deserve to receive the tablets will not fall down. They will hang in air. But if the Jewish people no longer deserve the tablets, they will get smashed. So he just opened his hands and the tablets fell down and smashed. Why? Because they lost their holiness. The letters flew up back to Hashem. Now, Moshe, in verse 20, took the calf and burnt it in fire. He melted it again And then after it cooled down, it was just one mass. He ground it to a fine powder. Step number 2. And step number 3, he sprinkled the powder over water. And step number 4, he made the Jewish people drink the water. And whoever served idols without witnesses died from drinking this water. This was just like the waters of Sotah, a woman whose husband suspects her of disloyalty. He takes her to Bet HaMikdash and she drinks the water in which name of God was dissolved. And if she is indeed guilty, she dies. And if she is innocent, she becomes healthy and gives birth to a healthy baby. That's what happened to the Jewish people. Those that served the idol without witnesses died right there. Now, Moshe questioned Aaron, why did you make the golden calf? Aaron said, you know that the people is disposed toward evil. They're not yet the righteous nation that we are trying to build them into. They are still growing, and we have to be forgiving towards them. They they said to me, make us a god that will go before us, because Moshe is gone. They did not make it instead of God; they made it instead of Moshe. Moshe saw the people that it was exposed or restrained. That he saw that the people are feeling bad what they did, that Aaron had exposed them to disgrace among those who rise up against them. Verse 26 on page 501, Moshe takes control of the nation. Moshe stood at the gateway of camp and said, whoever is for Hashem, join me. And all the Levites gathered around him. None of the people of the tribe of Levi served the idol, so they all were confident that we can fight against those that serve the idol. And Moshe said, everyone who is on my side should take his sword and pass throughout the camp, and let every man kill his relative, whoever served the idols, with witnesses. This is the second punishment for the Jewish people. The first one was for those that served without witnesses, they were killed by the water in which the idol was dissolved. The second set of people were killed because they served the idol with witnesses. Every Jew who was about to serve the idol was approached by two other Jews and they were informed, do you know that you're not allowed to serve idols? And do you know there's death penalty for it? And he said, yes, I know, leave me alone. I want to serve this calf. So they were killed by the sword. And 3,000 people died on that day from the sword, which means people who actually served the idol with witnesses and warning, there were 3,000. That means 0.5% of 600,000 men. Moshe returned to Hashem in verse 31 and said, I implore, I beg you, this people has committed a grievous sin and made themselves a god of gold. And now if you would but forgive their sin. Moshe was able to save the Jewish people from immediate death, but now he says, forgive them. Don't punish them in the long run. But if not, erase me now from your book that you have written. Moshe is willing to sacrifice his life in this world as well as in the next world. He is willing to give up his olam haba, just to save the Jewish people. And Hashem said to Moshe, don't worry. Whoever has sinned against me, I shall erase from my book. And now, go and lead the people. Behold, my angel shall go before you. It will no longer be God himself who is going to lead the Jews. It's going to be a messenger, an angel. However, in the future, on the day that I will make my account, I shall bring their sin to account against them. That means that every time in the future when Hashem brings suffering and punishment upon the Jewish people, part of that suffering is because of the golden calf. Instead of giving the whole punishment right away, Hashem divided the punishment into small parts so that the Jewish people can handle it and survive. And now, verse 35 tells us the third punishment for those that served the idol. Then Hashem struck the people with a plague because they had made the calf. This was a third group that served the idol with witnesses, but they were not warned properly. So they also deserved death, but this was death at the hands of heaven. Now, chapter 33. Hashem spoke to Moshe and told him, now continue walking to the land which I swore to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We're on page 503. However, Hashem says again in verse 2, I shall send an angel ahead of you. Instead of God, there will be an angel. But don't worry, the angel will be my messenger, and I shall drive out the Canaanite and Amorite and Hittite, Perizzite, Hivite, and Yebusite. And I'll bring you to the land flowing with milk and honey. But I will not go among you, because you are a stiff-necked people. It's safer for you like this. Because if I go among you and the Jewish people sin again, I may annihilate them this time. People do teshuvah. In verse 4, the people heard this bad tidings and they became grief-stricken. They regret, they have remorse. And no one donned his jewelry. They removed their fancy garments and jewelry. Now, the commentators say that this also means that the Jewish people lost their immortality. When the Jewish people received the Torah, they returned to the level of Adam HaRishon before the sin. The first man, when he was created in Gan Eden, he was pure. The Jewish people that received the Torah, they were purified from all their sins and all the sins of previous generations, including Adam HaRishon, and they became immortal like Adam HaRishon was supposed to be. But now that they made golden calf, that crown of glory that was placed on their head was removed. That's the jewelry that is spoken about, and together with it, their innocence, their purity was removed, and together with it, their immortality was removed. Verse 6 says, so the children of Israel were stripped of their jewelry from Mount Horeb. The jewelry that they received on Mount Horeb was removed. And now verse 7, Moshe moved his tent to the outside of the camp. And now whoever wanted to speak to Hashem would have to go out of the camp to the tent of meeting, to the tent of Moshe, which was outside the camp. Verse 9, when Moshe would arrive at the tent, a pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent. This was the divine presence. Not the Mishkan yet. Mishkan wasn't built yet. The tent of Moshe served as the meeting place between God and his people. And God would speak to Moshe from the pillar of cloud. and the entire people would see the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent. And the entire people would bow down towards the pillar of cloud. Verse 11, Hashem would speak to Moshe face to face. Now we're on page 505. The Torah describes the high level of prophecy of Moshe, more than any other person alive. Hashem spoke to Moshe face to face as a man would speak to his fellow. Now, Moshe goes up the mountain second time and spends another 40 days praying for the Jewish people. Moshe said to Hashem, "See, you say to me, take these people onward, but you did not inform me who you will send with me. And now, if I indeed found favor in your eyes, make your ways known to me, and see that this nation is your people." Moshe is trying to convince Hashem to lead the Jewish people himself. In verse 14 he says, Hashem agrees, and Hashem says, "My presence will go and provide you rest." Moshe prayed, and again Hashem said, "Fine. I agree to lead the Jewish people, not the angel anymore. I will lead the Jewish people again." And Moshe, just to reassure himself, says in verse 15, "If your presence doesn't go along, do not bring us forward from here. Unless you accompany us, and I and your people will be made distinct from every people on the face of the earth." And that is because every nation in the world has an angel that supervises. We call it guardian angel over every nation. But over the Jewish people, it is God himself who takes care of us. And in verse 17, Hashem says again to Moshe, "Yes, I accept your prayer again. Even this thing of which you spoke I shall do, for you have found favor in my eyes." Now, page 507, Moshe asks Hashem to reveal himself. Moshe wants to know God fully. Verse 18, he said, "Show me now your glory." But Hashem says, "No, even you, Moshe, the highest level of prophet, you have your limitations. I shall make all my goodness pass before you." And here Hashem gives an answer to Moshe. Moshe asked Hashem, "I want to know your ways," which means, why do bad things happen to the good people? Why do good things happen to the bad people? And Hashem says in verse 19, second line, "I shall show favor to whom I choose to show favor, and I shall show mercy to whom I choose to show mercy." Which means ultimately a human being cannot understand. Ultimately I decide, Hashem decides who will get mercy and who doesn't. We can have a hint, we can guess why a certain person is rewarded or punished. But only Hashem knows the entire picture. Only Hashem knows the entire physical world, whatever happens in every molecule and atom in the entire universe, and he knows whatever is happening in the spiritual world, because he is the creator and sustainer of both physical and spiritual worlds. But we as human beings, being part of the physical world and our neshama part of the spiritual world, we don't see the whole picture. And Hashem says in verse 20, "You will not be able to see my face," which means you cannot see God clearly. You cannot understand God fully. For no human can see my face and live. You can only understand God when you leave this physical existence and you rejoin God. Your neshama cleaves to God again. As one Jewish sage said, Ilu yidativ heitiv. If I would understand God, I would become God. We cannot know God until our soul rejoins God. And Hashem in verse 23 further says, you will see my back, but my face may not be seen. Which means you will understand my actions after they happened, but you cannot understand why I am doing certain thing as I'm doing it. Cannot see my face, only my back. Now, chapter 34. Hashem gives Moshe the second set of the tablets. And this is the third set of 40 days that Moshe spends on Har Sinai. Hashem said to Moshe, carve for yourself 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and I shall inscribe on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets that you shattered. Page 509. Ascend Mount Sinai in the morning. Verse 4. So Moshe carved out 2 stone tablets. He arose early in the morning and ascended to Har Sinai. And Moshe stayed on Har Sinai again for 40 days, praying to Hashem to forgive the Jewish people entirely. And now Hashem reveals finally at the end of the 40 days on Yom Kippur, Hashem reveals his 13 attributes of mercy. Hashem passed before Moshe and proclaimed, Hashem, Hashem, God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger and abundant in kindness and truth. He preserves the kindness for thousands of generations. He forgives iniquity. He forgives willful sin and error. And he cleanses, but does not cleanse completely until a person does teshuvah. He still recalls the iniquity, the sins of parents upon the children in the 3rd and 4th generation. If the children follow the evil way of their parents, then they are punished not only for their sin, but also for the sin of their parents. And now Moshe asks Hashem for 3 more things. Let my Lord go among us, number 1. Forgive our iniquity and error. And number 3, make us your heritage, which means commit that we, the Jewish people, are going to be your only nation ever chosen. You're not going to exchange us for anyone else. And Hashem answered in verse 10, behold, I seal a covenant before your entire people. I shall make distinctions such as have never been created in the entire world among all the nations. Which means Jewish people are going to be special and separate. And the entire people among whom you are will see the work of Hashem, which is awesome, that I am about to do with you. Jewish people were separated and they are distinct, different from every other nation in the world. And now, beware of what I command you today. Verse 12, be vigilant, lest you seal a covenant with the inhabitant of the land. Don't make any deals with the local population. Rather, verse 13, you shall break apart their altars and smash their pillars and cut down its sacred trees. Destroy idolatry from the land. Because if you seal a covenant with them, you will intermarry. You will take their daughters for your sons and their daughters' stray after their gods and enticed your sons to stray after their gods. From here we learn that Jewish people are not allowed to intermarry. Now, we go to verse 18. Here we learn about the holidays. You shall observe the festival of Matzot. For a 7-day period you shall eat Matzot. Page 513. The mitzvah of the firstborn of the kosher animals, of donkeys, and of human beings. Every first issue of a womb is mine, as well as any of your livestock produces a male. The first issue of an ox or sheep, the first issue of a donkey, you shall redeem with a lamb. And further, redeem every firstborn of your sons. So the Jewish people have a special mitzvah of firstborn. Every firstborn of a kosher animal we give to a kohen. Every firstborn of a donkey we exchange for a sheep, and we give the sheep to kohen. And every firstborn baby male we redeem with 5 silver coins, and we give the money to kohen. Why? Because after the sin of the golden calf, the firstborn males of the Jewish people lost their lofty status of being servants of God, and they were replaced by Kohanim and Levim. And now, as a payment for Kohanim doing the job of the firstborn must pay 5 silver coins. Now, we speak about Shabbat and the other 2 holidays, Shavuot and Sukkot. After we spoke about Pesach, now we mention other holidays. Verse 21, 6 days shall you work, and on the 7th day you shall stay away from plowing and harvesting. Verse 22 speaks about Shavuot. You shall make the festival of weeks, which means you count 7 weeks from Pesach, and then you have Shavuot. And the festival of the harvest, which is the Sukkot, shall be at the changing of the year. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord, Hashem, the God of Israel. And Hashem promises that when the Jewish people go to Jerusalem 3 times a year from around the world and from the entire land of Israel, no man will covet your land. When you go up to appear before Hashem your God 3 times a year, Hashem will protect our fields and our homes. And now, at the end of the page, we have a mitzvah. Do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. This is the second time it's mentioned. And the first time it was mentioned, it referred to the prohibition of cooking meat with milk. Now it refers to the prohibition of eating meat with milk, as well as benefiting from meat and milk that was cooked together. Now we go to page 515. The second tablets are received, the renewal of the covenant. Verse 27, Hashem said to Moshe, write these words for yourself. And according to these words, I have sealed a covenant with you and with the Jewish people. Moshe remained on the mountain with Hashem for 40 days and 40 nights. He did not eat and he did not drink. And Hashem wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. Moshe brings the 10 commandments down. This is on Yom Kippur. Moshe descended from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony. Moshe did not know that the skin of his face had become radiant when Hashem had spoken to him. And the children of Israel saw Moshe, and the skin of his face was radiant, and they feared to approach him. They thought that Moshe turned into half angel, half God. They were afraid. His face is shining. So Moshe called them, and the Jewish people would approach. He spoke to them kindly and said, "Don't be afraid. I'm still a human. I'm not gonna hurt you." So then Aharon approached, and then the leaders of the assembly approached, and after that, all the children of Israel approached, and Moshe taught them the entire Torah. Verse 33. Moshe finished speaking with them and placed a mask on his face. Because his face was shining, he did not want to embarrass the Jewish people, to show them, if only you didn't serve the golden calf, you would reach what I have now. Your face would be shining. Your soul, your neshama would be bursting forth through your body. And not to embarrass, not to show such a big difference between his face and their face, he put a mask on his face. When Moshe would come before Hashem to speak with Hashem, he would remove the mask. Then he would leave and tell the children of Israel whatever he had been commanded. And when the children of Israel saw Moshe's face, then Moshe's face had become radiant. Moshe put the mask back on his face until Moshe came to speak with Hashem. So now we just finished the story from giving of the Torah. 40 days Moshe was on Mount Sinai. He came back, and Jewish people built the golden calf. He smashed the tablets on 17th of Tammuz. On the 18th of Tammuz, he went up the mountain again for another 40 days until 29th of Av, and he got forgiveness for the Jewish people. And Hashem told him, "Come to the mountain again for 40 days, and I will give you a new set of 10 commandments." And Moshe went up the mountain from the 1st of Elul until the 10th of Tishrei, which is Yom Kippur. And now the Parsha finishes with Moshe coming down with the second set of 10 commandments, and Moshe's face is shining. And here I will remind you of what happened afterwards. What we read in Parshat Yitro, the next day after Yom Kippur, Hashem gave the Jewish people the mitzvah to build the Mishkan as a dwelling place for Hashem. And the Mishkan and the Korbanot that are offered there are an atonement for the golden calf as well. And the fact that we now are going to have a single place where all the Jewish people are going to come, that is, instead of every Jewish family being a miniature Beit HaMikdash and every firstborn in the family being the Kohen, now that was replaced with the national altar, national Beit HaMikdash, to prevent further idol worship. And on the next day after Yom Kippur, Moshe finally sat down after being on the mountain for 120 days, not eating, not drinking, not sitting, not sleeping. Moshe finally sat down and he was judging the people, and that's when Yitro approached, and that's the story where Yitro advised Moshe to appoint 70 leaders to help Moshe with judging the nation and leading the nation. And again, what we learn at the end of this parsha, that Moshe's face is shining, is supposed to be a goal for us. Our body, our physical body, covers up and interferes with our soul. Our neshama is really shining. Our neshama is beautiful. Our neshama is pure. And our goal in life is to take control over our body and purify our body, make our body more and more spiritual, until the holiness will be shining from our face. And that's what many people testify and witness, that when they look at a person who dedicates his life to Torah and mitzvot and Hashem and helping the Jewish people, such person's face shines with holiness. People say their face radiates spiritual light. And I have met such people as well, that you just want to look at them. They're such beautiful, beautiful, pure face. You feel godliness on their face. But we have to know that godliness exists in every human being. It might be hidden deeper, but it's there. And we have to be able to see that. Every time you look at person's face, you have to tell yourself, that person is made in the image of God. That person has a holy soul. That person has purity and holiness, sanctity. It's in him. And we have to see that in the person. Imagine it and bring it out. Bezat Hashem, we should purify our body. We should um, increase the influence of our neshama, of our soul in our life. Bezat Hashem, our soul should be in control, not our body. We should not make mistakes. Bezat Hashem, we should be always on the right path. We should always be eager to accept Hashem's communication with us. We shouldn't say, oh, it's not for us, let someone else tell me what to do. I don't want to be too close to Hashem. We should run to Hashem, and Bezat Hashem, we should follow Moshe's path, where he fully accepted upon himself to listen to Hashem and to do what Hashem says. And we should also follow Moshe's example, where he was willing to sacrifice his life, his physical life and his spiritual life, for the sake of the Jewish people. We should be as loving and caring towards the Jewish people as Moshe, and then we will be like Moshe. The more you love the Jews, the greater you become. Bezat Hashem, may we see Hashem again. May we rebuild the Beit HaMikdash again. And Bezat Hashem, we should all meet in Yerushalayim. Thank you for listening. Shabbat Shalom. Have a good night.